Hi everyone, my name is Matt, aka the UKAstroNut. In this video I'm going to be answering the question, is the moon made of cheese? Now, you probably remember when you were a kid that you were told maybe that the moon was made of cheese, or you watched the Wallace and Gromit film of Grand Day Out, where they run out of cheese, they have to go all the way up to the moon with their crackers. But sadly I'm here to tell you that the moon actually isn't made of cheese. But what it is made of is actually quite interesting, so I'm going to try and explain it today. First things first, we have to go back 4 billion years or so, when the solar system was first formed. Now, at the beginning of the solar system, you had the sun at the centre, and you had all the planets that are just starting to form, and they're all spinning around as they do now. But there are probably more planets than there were now. Some of them have probably been destroyed or flung out into space and things like this. And actually, around this time, we had our young Earth, but it had no moon at this point. And another planet, we think, smashed into our Earth. And as it smashed in, loads of material from both planets flung straight out and started spinning around the Earth. And the other planet got destroyed or got flown off somewhere else. Now, all this material that was going around the Earth, that was left over from the collision, slowly formed together and formed our moon. So actually, our moon is made from material from the Earth. So theoretically, you'd think that the Earth was the same as the moon. So actually, from previous moon landings, when we've got pieces of moon rock and things like this, we've been able to study what the rock is made of the moon. And it's things like silicon, iron, aluminium, calcium, things like this. And a lot of them are reacted with oxygen. So you get things called silicates, which are basically silicon and oxygen together. And the oxygen is probably a hint from that probably had oxygen maybe from our atmosphere or from other places. But actually, I mean, we've all seen pictures of the moon, and you've seen that the surface of the moon is very different from the Earth. I mean, it doesn't have lovely trees, and it doesn't have this nice brown, rich soil and grass and stuff. And that's mainly because of the atmosphere. So the Earth has a lovely atmosphere, and we keep all our air and our moisture and everything inside, but the moon doesn't have an atmosphere. So the surface of the moon is very dry, hard, kind of unnurtured soil, basically. So it's all these things I said before, you know, silicon, iron and so on. But it's very sort of dry. It's not the sort of rich soil and things that we have here down on Earth, because they don't have an atmosphere on the moon. So the moon actually is quite similar to Earth in the structure. It has a core in the centre, and then it has a mantle around the outside, and then a crust on the outside. So the core is the very hot part. The mantle is a sort of slightly cooler part that makes up the sort of majority of the moon, and you have a very thin crust around the outside. So, in terms of what the moon is actually made of, it's made of kind of what things here on Earth are made of. And it's just made of normal material that we find down here on Earth mainly. But the surface of the moon is actually very different as well. And this is because the moon has no atmosphere, unlike here on Earth, when we have meteors, which are bits of rocks from space that come down and they hit the Earth. Well, on Earth, they go through our atmosphere, and our atmosphere breaks them and burns them up and makes them very, very small and things. So they don't do much damage. But on the moon this doesn't happen, and because it doesn't have an atmosphere, the meteors just plummet straight into the surface of the moon. And what happens is, if you imagine you have like a big bowl of biscuits, okay, bear with me. So you have this big bowl of biscuits, and you get your hand, and you hit your hand into this big bowl of biscuits, but all the crumbs and everything are going to go everywhere, and you're basically going to break them up, and you're going to break them into smaller pieces. But further down, you're not going to break all of them. If you had loads and loads of layers, you'd break the top layer, but the bottom layers would be fine. So that's basically what's happened on the moon, is that the sort of the lower levels of the moon aren't impacted, aren't changed or anything by all these meteors and things hitting the surface. But the very surface layer is, and it's all broken up into very small pieces. So actually the surface of the moon is a very, very fine powder. It's made up of these same kind of materials. It's made up of things like silicon dioxide and things like this, basically silicon. And so that's what the surface of the moon is like, is this very, very fine powder. And actually astronauts describe it as being quite like snow. You kind of imagine picking it up and you scoop up, and it's that kind of fine powder that kind of, well, maybe it sticks together, but it's that kind of consistency of snow. So that is what the moon is made of. So sadly, it isn't made of cheese. However, it is made from the remnants of the Earth. It's what happened when the Earth collided with another planet 4-something billion years ago. And all the material that got flung out in the collision formed our moon. And since then, the surface of it has just been hit by billions and billions of meteors, and it's just damaged all the surface of the Earth and of the moon, and it's just created this thin, powdery layer on top. So hopefully that answers some questions that the moon isn't made of cheese, but is a bit more interesting there, possibly. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.